At 7:42 on opening night, 600 people stood to applaud my retirement. I was backstage, locked inside the costume vault, wearing half a Roman senator's robe, and holding a toilet plunger. The robe was an accident. The plunger was not. Our oldest dressing room sink had chosen that particular evening to demonstrate what 48 years of deferred plumbing maintenance looked like. I had gone to the vault for towels. The door slammed behind me, the lock clicked from the outside, and then my daughter's voice floated through the ventilation grill. "Tonight," Lena announced from the stage, "we honor my father, Gideon Mercer, as he steps away from Lantern House Theatre after nearly 5 decades of service." I did not step away. I kicked the door. A rack of Victorian mourning clothes trembled. On stage, the audience applauded harder. Lena continued. "Following a private period of declining health, Dad has chosen peace, family, and a well-earned retirement." I was healthy enough to consider using the plunger as a diplomatic instrument. My son Marcus took the microphone next. "Our father always said the theater belongs to the next generation." That part was true. I had said it whenever I wanted teenagers to paint scenery for free. Marcus continued, "And tonight, we are proud to announce a partnership that will secure this property's future." That part was not true. I stopped kicking. Through the grill came the sound of a projection screen lowering, followed by polite gasps. My son-in-law Adrian Vale began speaking in the smooth, expensive voice of a man who had never carried a sofa through a narrow backstage door. "Lantern House will be transformed into Mercer Square, a residential and cultural destination featuring luxury apartments, dining, retail, and a permanent memorial to the theater's remarkable history." There is a special kind of insult in being promised a memorial for something that is not yet dead. "My name is Gideon Mercer. I was 71 years old when my children sold the theater my wife and I built, declared me mentally unfit, and locked me in a room containing 6 fake swords, 11 feathered hats, and a papier-mâché moon. By midnight, I would learn that they had forged my signature on a $12 million sale. By breakfast, I would discover that scholarship money meant for local children had vanished. And before the week ended, my 17-year-old granddaughter, a one-eyed stage cat, and my late wife's unfinished play would help me expose a plan that reached from our ticket office to the mayor's private dining room. But at 7:43, my immediate problem was the door. I searched the costume vault for another exit. The room had no window, but it did have a trap panel built during our 1998 production of The Count of Monte Cristo, when our designer decided every room required a secret passage. The panel had not opened in 20 years. I found the seam behind a row of military coats and pushed. Nothing. I used the plunger handle as a lever. The wood groaned, just fell into my hair, and the panel opened 6 inches before striking something heavy. Something on the other side hissed. "Basil?" I whispered. A gray paw appeared through the gap. Basil, the theater cat, had one eye, no respect for boundaries, and a habit of sleeping in the old prop tunnel. He hissed again, either in greeting or criticism. I pushed harder. The panel moved enough for me to crawl through. I emerged on my hands and knees beneath the stage-left staircase while Adrian explained that the original facade would be thoughtfully preserved. Basil stepped onto my back. I stayed low and looked through the railings. The stage had been transformed for the gala. Gold curtains framed a model of Mercer Square. Tiny plastic people wandered between tiny plastic trees where our rehearsal rooms currently stood. Lena wore a red evening dress. Marcus wore a tuxedo. Adrian stood beside a representative from Bellwether Development and a city councilman named Paul Hennig. On the projection screen was my signature. Gideon Arthur Mercer. Below it, seller authorization. The final curl of the R was wrong. My wife, Celia, Used to say I signed my name like a man falling downstairs. The forged version looked graceful. That alone should have convicted them. A hand closed around my ankle. I nearly shouted. Beatrice Doyle, our stage manager, crouched beneath the stairs wearing a headset and black clothing. Everyone called her Bix because, according to her, Beatrice is a name for women who inherit legs. Bix was 68, 5 feet tall, and capable of stopping a full musical with one raised eyebrow. "They told me you left through the alley," she whispered. "They locked me in costumes." "Which costume?" "Roman senator." "Then democracy has failed twice tonight." She handed me my cane. "I do not use a cane." "You may need to hit someone." On stage, Lena raised a glass. "To Dad." The audience stood again. Bix looked at me. "Shall I drop the curtain?" "No." "Fire the confetti cannon at Adrian?" "Tempting." "Release Basil?" "He is already operational." I watched my children smiling beneath the lights I had hung with their mother. Lena was 43, brilliant with numbers, impatient with mess, and convinced that every problem could be solved if people stopped being sentimental. Marcus was 39, an actor who had become executive director after deciding applause was less reliable than payroll. I loved them both. That fact did not make the signature real. I stepped from beneath the stairs and walked onto the stage. The applause changed shape. At first, people thought my arrival was planned. Then they noticed the dust in my hair, the half-tied robe around my waist, and the toilet plunger still in my hand. Lena's face went white. Adrian recovered first. "Gideon," he said warmly, "you made it." "I was delayed by retirement." A few people laughed. The councilman did not. Marcus moved toward me. "Dad, not here." "Where would you prefer? The costume vault?" Bix appeared in the wings and held up the broken lock. The room became very quiet. Lena lowered her glass. "You were resting against the inside of a locked door." Adrian stepped between me and the microphone. "Gideon is tired. This is exactly why tonight's transition matters." I looked at the screen. "That is not my signature." The bellwether representative stopped smiling. Adrian said, "You signed the authorization Monday." "On Monday I spent 3 hours teaching 12-year-olds how not to stab each other with foam swords." "Your memory has been inconsistent." There it was. Not concern. Preparation. Marcus held out a folder. "Dad, Dr. Emil Sorrell reviewed the incidents we documented." "What incidents?" "Missing meetings. Repeating stories. Unauthorized expenses." "I tell the same stories because audiences improve slowly." "Which expenses?" Lena answered. "Repairs. Cash withdrawals. Payments to staff outside approved budgets." "I paid the chorus after you delayed payroll." "You see?" Adrian said softly to the audience. "He cannot distinguish personal generosity from fiduciary responsibility." Bix muttered from the wings, "I can distinguish his face from a sandbag if that helps." I took the folder. A letter from Dr. Sorrell described me as disoriented, impulsive, and vulnerable to manipulation. I had met him once at a donor luncheon. He had asked whether I remembered him. I had said no because he was forgettable. Apparently that counted as an examination. The next document appointed Lena and Mark as temporary custodians of my voting shares. The one after that approved the sale. I turned to my children. How much? Lena's eyes flicked toward Adrian. How much did you sell it for? 12 million, Marcus said. The audience murmured. Lantern House sat on a city block now worth nearly twice that. Adrian said, the property requires major structural work. Bellwether assumes substantial risk. Bellwether is buying $18 million of land for 12. Sentiment is not valuation. And fraud is not a signature. The councilman approached the microphone. Perhaps this family discussion should continue privately. Councilman Hannock, I said, you approved a historic preservation grant for this building last year. He smiled without showing teeth. And Mercer Square preserves the facade. The facade is not the theater. No, Bix called from the wings, but it is apparently enough culture for people who eat lunch with developers. The audience laughed again. Adrian's control slipped. Cut his microphone. The sound technician, a college student named Mina, looked at Bix. Bix shook her head. Mina left it on. Lena came close enough that only I could hear. Dad, please. We can explain everything tomorrow. You announced my retirement tonight. We needed certainty. You needed me absent. Her eyes filled briefly. Then Adrian touched her elbow. The tears vanished. Security appeared at the edge of the stage. 2 guards I had hired for the gala approached with the apologetic posture of men hoping to remove their founder without becoming local legends for the wrong reason. I handed the folder to Bix. Copy everything. Adrian reached for it. Bix stepped backward and gave it to Basil. The cat seized a loose ribbon and ran beneath the set. It was not a sophisticated legal strategy, but it delayed Adrian 20 seconds. The guards escorted me through the lobby while guests stared. Some looked embarrassed. Some looked entertained. One elderly subscriber whispered, "Give them hell, Gideon." Outside, rain had begun. My office key no longer opened the side entrance. My apartment above the rehearsal studio had been emptied. A cardboard box waited beside the curb. Inside were 2 sweaters, Celia's framed photograph, my medications, and a reservation at the Monarch Motor Lodge. There was also $300 in cash. I left the money on the pavement. Bix came out carrying the folder beneath her coat. Basil followed, dragging a gold ribbon. "You have somewhere to go?" she asked. The apartment was somewhere. "You can stay in my guest room." "Your guest room contains mannequins. They are excellent listeners." Before I could answer, a young woman ran from the alley. My granddaughter Ivy wore black jeans, a green raincoat, and the expression Celia used whenever someone underestimated her. "Grandpa," she said, breathing hard, "do not go with Bix yet." Bix looked offended. "My mannequins have references." Ivy pulled a water-damaged script from beneath her coat. Celia's handwriting covered the cover. "The Last House Light. Final draft. Do not let Adrian read." I stared at the title. Celia had died 3 years earlier. I had never seen the play. Ivy opened to the first page. Taped inside was a brass key and a note. "Gideon, if Lena and Marcus ever try to sell the theater, the proof is hidden inside the story. Do not trust the first ending. There are 3. We went first to Bix's house because the theater had already taught me the danger of obvious destinations. Bix lived in a narrow brick row house filled with retired props, rescued furniture, and 3 mannequins dressed according to season. The one in the hallway wore a raincoat and appeared more prepared for the weather than I was. She put towels in the dryer, tea on the stove, and Adrian's folder beneath a ceramic fruit bowl that weighed enough to discourage theft. Ivy spread Celia's script across the dining table. The pages were swollen from damp, but the handwriting remained clear. Celia had written the play by hand in black ink and covered the margins with notes in blue, red, and green pencil. The story concerned an old mansion owned by 3 siblings. Each sibling believed a different person had inherited it. Doors opened into rooms that should not exist. A portrait changed expression. A dishonest lawyer kept measuring the windows. "Your grandmother called this subtle?" Bix asked. "She considered actual names unnecessary aggression," I said. The first ending appeared on page 87. The oldest daughter sold the house to the lawyer. The walls were demolished. Everyone received money and pretended the empty lot was progress. Celia had crossed out the final speech and written, "Ending 1. What they want you to see." Below it, in tiny letters, was a sequence of stage directions. Blue lamp. 3 knocks. Turn the portrait toward the river. Key waits where the dead man laughs. Ivy placed the brass key beside the script. "Where does a dead man laugh?" she asked. Bix poured tea. "In critics' reviews." Celia and I had built Lantern House inside the abandoned Wycliffe Opera Hall. Before that, the building had hosted vaudeville, civic meetings, wrestling, weddings, and a traveling lecturer who claimed to communicate with Napoleon. The oldest surviving set piece was a painted portrait of Mr. Wycliffe, the hall's original owner. He looked severe from the audience, but a stagehand in 1924 had painted a laughing face on the back. The portrait hung in the basement archive, where it had before Lena changed the locks. I checked my phone. 16 missed calls. 3 from Marcus. 4 from reporters. 9 from people wanting to know whether the toilet plunger was symbolic. Lena had sent one message. "Come back to the theater alone. We can fix this before Dad's reputation is damaged." She had typed Dad while writing to Dad. That was either a stress or a message meant for someone else. I called her. Adrian answered. "Where is Ivy?" he asked. "With me. She removed private family property. She brought me her grandmother's play. The script belongs to the Mercer estate. I am the Mercer estate. Not according to the medical petition filed tonight." Bix stopped pouring. "What petition?" I asked. "A temporary guardianship request. For your protection. You filed it before I objected to the sale. We prepared options." "How efficient." "If you return the documents, attend an evaluation, and sign a revised statement tomorrow, Lena may withdraw the petition." "Lena may?" Another voice entered the call. My daughter. "Dad, please tell Ivy to come home. She is 17, not evidence. She is frightened and confused. She understood the fake signature immediately." Lena exhaled. "Adrian says the sale is the only way to protect the theater's debts." "What debts?" "The renovation loans. Tax arrears. Payroll obligations." "How much?" "Nearly $9 million. My hand tightened around the phone. Lantern House had no authority to borrow more than $2 million without my vote. What did you use as collateral? She did not answer. The Youth Scholarship Fund came to mind before I wanted it to. Every year, our foundation paid tuition, travel, meals, and equipment for children who could not afford theater programs. Celia had built it from small donations, benefit performances, and one extraordinarily profitable production of Calendar Girls attended by half the city for reasons nobody admitted. Lena, I said, is the scholarship fund intact? Adrian returned to the line. This conversation is becoming unproductive. It became productive the moment nobody answered. He ended the call. Harriet Venn arrived 20 minutes later. Harriet had served as Lantern House's accountant until Adrian replaced her with Vail Strategic Management, a company whose main strategy appeared to be giving Adrian invoices. She was 74, wore bright purple shoes, and believed calculators should make audible clicks so numbers know someone is watching. Bix handed her the folder. Harriet read the sale authorization, medical letter, and board minutes without speaking. Then she removed her glasses. The board meeting never happened. It lists 6 members present, Ivy said. One has been dead since February. 2 were in Portugal. I was supposedly there, and I spent Monday having a colonoscopy. Bix nodded. A stronger alibi than most. Harriet examined the financing summary. Bellwether is not merely buying the land. It is assuming debt held by a lender called North Key Capital. Do you know them? I know they financed Adrian's failed hotel project in Cleveland. She opened her laptop and searched public records. North Key Capital was controlled through 3 companies. The final owner was Bellwether Development. Adrian had borrowed money from the buyer, secured it against our theater, and arranged a sale to the same buyer at a discount. The debt was not a problem Bellwether had agreed to solve. The debt was how Bellwether planned to take the property. Harriet scrolled farther. There is a city restoration grant involved. $4.2 million awarded after the roof fire 2 years ago. We repaired the roof for less than $1 million, I said. According to these invoices, the theater spent all $4.2. On what? She read the vendor names. Vail Historic Consulting. Mercer Youth Outreach Solutions. Hennick Community Renewal. Councilman Hennick's name appeared on the third company. The mayor's brother owned a quarter of Bellwether. The play's dishonest lawyer was apparently underwritten by local government. Ivy turned pages quickly. The blue notes, she said. Grandma used blue for money. Celia had color-coded every object in the play. Blue referred to financial records. Red referred to people. Green referred to places. On page 12, a servant carried 3 blue lamps into a locked pantry. On page 34, someone knocked 3 times before turning the founder's portrait toward the river. The instruction from the first ending combined all 3 clues. Basement archive. Wycliffe portrait. 3 knocks. Brass key. We need to get inside, Ivy said. No, I told her. You need to go to your aunt's house. I am helping. You are a minor whose parents have threatened a runaway report. I did not run away. I walked out during a fraud gala. That distinction may not impress a police officer. She crossed her arms. Grandma wrote to me too. From her pocket she removed a folded note found inside the script's back cover. My dearest Ivy, if adults tell you not to get involved, Ask whether they mean danger or inconvenience. Avoid the first. Be suspicious of the second. Never go alone. Never lie to protect us. And remember that courage is not proof against foolishness. Ivy looked at me. She specifically prepared for this conversation. Bix said, Celia was impossible to overrule posthumously. We called Ivy's maternal aunt, Rachel, an emergency room nurse who regarded Adrian with a warmth usually reserved for infected wounds. Rachel agreed to take legal responsibility for Ivy overnight and accompany us anywhere dangerous. Then Bix revealed that Lantern House still had an entrance Lena did not know about. During a production of Noises Off, the company installed a narrow service door behind the alley dumpster so actors could enter during a scene change without crossing the lobby. The door had been covered by a false brick panel but never sealed. At 1 in the morning, 6 of us stood in the alley behind Lantern House, me, Bix, Ivy, Rachel, Harriet, and a retired illusionist named Norman Pike. Norman joined because he knew the basement archive and because Bix refused to crawl through any passage before someone checked it for rats. I do not remove rats, Norman clarified. I distract them. With what? Ivy asked. Professional secrets. The dumpster smelled like rain, cabbage, and municipal defeat. Bix removed the false panel. The service door opened onto a passage beneath the rehearsal wing. We entered one at a time. Basil appeared from the darkness and joined us without invitation. Norman whispered, "Excellent. The rat specialist has arrived." We reached the basement archive without seeing security. The room contained old posters, ledgers, costumes too historically important to wear and too ugly to display, and the Wycliffe portrait facing forward. I knocked 3 times on the frame. Nothing happened. Bix knocked 3 times harder. The portrait fell off the wall. Norman caught it before it struck the floor. On the back, Mr. Wycliffe's painted face laughed beneath a layer of dust. A brass keyhole had been cut into one wooden stretcher bar. I inserted Celia's key. A narrow compartment opened. Inside were a flash drive, a miniature recorder, an envelope marked scholarships, and the second ending of Celia's play. I reached for the envelope. Lights came on in the corridor. Footsteps approached. Bix switched off our flashlight. A security guard entered the archive carrying a radio. We stood behind shelves, silent enough to hear the rain striking basement windows. Basil walked directly into the corridor. The guard sighed. "There you are, you little criminal." He bent to pick up the cat. Basil scratched his sleeve, darted between his legs, and knocked over a box of metal goblets. The guard followed him toward the prop room, swearing quietly. Bix mouthed, "Operational." We moved toward the service passage. Before we reached it, Adrian's voice came over the guard's radio. "Check the Wycliffe portrait. Celia hid records there once." He knew. The guard answered from the next room. The corridor door closed between us and the exit. Norman looked toward an antique wardrobe. "No," Bix whispered. "Yes," he whispered back. The wardrobe had once been used for a stage disappearance. 6 adults could not fit comfortably inside. We fit uncomfortably. Harriet stood with 1 foot in a hatbox. Rachel's elbow pressed against my ribs. Norman held the portrait above our heads. Ivy covered Basil's mouth after he entered at the last second and objected to the arrangement. The guard returned with Adrian. Through a crack, I saw my son-in-law examine the empty wall. "The compartment was opened," he said. "How can you tell?" "Dust." He knew exactly what he was looking for. Adrian called someone. "They have the drive," he said. Move the demolition inspection to morning. Once the building is condemned, anything found inside becomes compromised evidence." He listened. Then he added, "And make sure Gideon is served before sunrise. If the guardianship order is active, every decision he makes afterward can be challenged." My knees ached. Harriet's hatbox collapsed. Basil began purring. Adrian turned toward the wardrobe. His footsteps came closer. Norman reached into his coat and produced a small device. He pressed a button. From the prop room came a woman's scream, followed by maniacal laughter and a voice shouting, "The curse is awake!" The guard ran toward the sound. Adrian did not. He put one hand on the wardrobe handle. Then every fire alarm in Lantern House began ringing. Bix smiled in the darkness. "I asked Mina for a distraction," she whispered. Sprinklers did not activate, but emergency lights flashed. Adrian swore and left to deal with the alarm. We escaped through the service passage carrying the evidence, the portrait, and one crushed hatbox. Outside, Ivy looked at Norman. "What was that scream?" "My ex-wife," he said. "She licensed it to me after the divorce." The envelope marked scholarships contained names and account balances. Celia had documented 3 years of transfers from the Youth Fund into Vale Historic Consulting. The missing amount was $1,300,000. The flash drive contained invoices for restoration work that never happened, photographs of undamaged areas labeled as repaired, and emails between Adrian, Councilman Hennick, and Bellwether executives. The miniature recorder contained Celia's voice. She sounded tired. "If Gideon is hearing this," she said, "then I failed to stop them quietly. That may be for the best. Quiet solutions are often how respectable families hide ugly things." She explained that Lena had discovered the theater's financial problems after Marcus approved expensive productions without sufficient ticket revenue. Adrian offered loans through North Key. The loans became larger. To cover them, he moved scholarship funds and submitted false restoration invoices. Lena learned part of the truth. Marcus learned less. Both chose not to ask enough questions. "Adrian is not forcing our children to become dishonest," Celia said. "He is giving them reasons they prefer to honesty." Then her voice weakened. "The second ending identifies the accomplices. The third decides who owns the stage." The recording ended. Ivy opened the second ending. In it, the mansion's younger son discovered the lawyer's fraud but hid the evidence because he feared losing his career. The daughter signed false accounts to protect the family name. A councilman received a room in the new building. A doctor declared the father confused. At the bottom, Celia had written 4 real initials. AVPHESLM. Adrian Vale, Paul Hennick, Dr. Emil Sorrell, and Lena Mercer. My daughter had not merely believed Adrian. She had signed something Celia considered evidence. At 4 in the morning, we sat around Bix's table while Harriet examined Celia's files and Ivy slept with her head on folded arms. I did not sleep. The initials LM stayed on the page. I remembered Lena at 8 years old, standing on a rehearsal chair and announcing that actors who missed entrances would be fined 1 cookie. I remembered her carrying Celia's oxygen tank during the last months, pretending the machine was not heavy. I remembered every time I had mistaken competence for character because I wanted to be proud. Harriet found the document shortly before sunrise. It was an affidavit Lena signed 18 months earlier certifying that all restoration grant money had been spent on approved construction. Attached were photographs she knew were false. Her signature was genuine. Marcus's name did not appear. "What about the third ending?" Rachel asked. The script stopped after ending 2. The remaining pages had been cut out. Celia's note said the third ending decided who owned the stage. The answer was probably in the theater's founding trust. Celia and I created the Lantern Public Arts Trust when the company purchased the building. I had not read it in years. The original sat in a bank box requiring 2 keys, mine and Celia's. My key had been in my office desk. Celia's brass key had opened the portrait compartment. That meant the bank key was somewhere else. At 6:15, a process server knocked on Bix's door. He delivered the temporary guardianship petition and an emergency order preventing me from entering contracts, transferring assets, or accessing company accounts until a hearing Monday morning. Adrian had found a judge willing to act quickly. The petition included statements from Lena, Marcus, Dr. Sorrell, and 3 employees who claimed I forgot conversations, wandered backstage at night, and endangered productions with impulsive decisions. The examples were technically true. I had forgotten conversations with people who spoke without saying anything. I wandered backstage at night because the roof leaked. And I once stopped a production 6 minutes before curtain because an actor had replaced a safe stage sword with an antique metal one for authenticity. Facts can be arranged like scenery. From the audience, plywood becomes a palace. The order did not validate the forged sale, but it gave Adrian exactly what he wanted: time to call every action I took evidence of instability. At 7, the city building department arrived at Lantern House. By 8, a television reporter stood outside a red notice declaring the rehearsal wing unsafe because of electrical faults, structural damage, and mold. Adrian announced that public safety required the theater to close immediately. Bellwether moved the final signing to Friday night at the Grand Regent Hotel. They called it the Lantern Legacy Farewell. The city would watch my children sell the theater while I remained legally unable to object. Marcus called me at 9. His voice sounded as though he had not slept. "Dad, did Mom leave files? What did you know?" I asked first. "You are no longer in a position to direct scenes." He was quiet. Then he said, "I knew Adrian borrowed through North Key. I did not know about the scholarships until last year." "What did you do when you learned?" "I confronted him." "And?" "He said the money would return after the sale." "So you helped declare me confused." "He said you would stop everything." "He was right. If the sale stops, the theater collapses. Staff lose jobs. Students lose programs. We all lose. You already spent the students' money." His breath caught. "I never signed the transfers." "You signed the guardianship statement. To keep you from blowing up the deal before we could restore the funds." That sentence contains more scenery than structure. He began crying. A father wants to cross any room when he hears his child cry, even when the child built the room and locked the door. I remained seated. "Marcus," I said, "will you testify that the sale authorization is forged?" "If I do, Adrian calls the loans. The company enters bankruptcy." "That was not my question." "I need time." "No. You have used time as a hiding place. Friday night. Tell the truth where you helped tell the lie." He ended the call. By noon, Harriet located a scanned copy of the Lantern Public Arts Trust in old tax records. Section 14 was Celia's work. If any Mercer family officer knowingly diverted youth program funds, forged a trustee's authorization, or attempted to transfer the property through fraud, ownership would pass permanently to a community arts board. The board would include employees, students' parents, local artists, an independent accountant, and one representative selected by public subscribers. The Mercer family would lose all control, including me. Bix read the clause and said, "Celia did love you enough to protect the theater from you. She predicted I would object. She knew you considered ownership a personality trait." To activate the clause, the surviving trustee had to present the original trust and evidence before the sale closed. The original was in Commonwealth Bank. We needed both keys. Celia's missing bank key was hidden in a third ending. Ivy woke and reread the play from the beginning. At lunch she found a repeated stage direction. Whenever the mansion's true owner entered, a ghost light appeared at center stage. In the first ending, the light went out. In the second, it was moved to the wings. A handwritten note beside the final appearance read, "The last key sleeps where the light waits when no one is watching." Lantern House's ghost light stood on stage whenever the building was empty, a single exposed bulb on a metal pole, meant to prevent people from walking into scenery in the dark. Ours had a weighted brass base. Celia purchased it in a state auction. The building was condemned and guarded. We could not sneak inside again without risking arrest and giving Adrian fresh proof that I was reckless. Then Mina called Bix. The city inspector had ordered everyone out, but Adrian had allowed Bellwether's demolition surveyors inside. Mina remained because she was transferring audio files under management supervision. She could bring us the ghost light if she found a legitimate reason to remove it. Bix gave her one. "The light belongs to me," she said. "I purchased it personally in 2006 after Gideon drove over the old one. I did not see it. It was a light. An inadequate one." Mina carried the ghost light through the front doors at 3 that afternoon while reporters filmed. She told security it was personal equipment required for the farewell gala. At Bix's house, Norman unscrewed the brass base. Inside was a small envelope, the second bank key, and the missing pages of the play. The third ending was only 4 pages long. In it, the old father refused to reclaim the mansion. He opened it to the town, gave every family member a job without a title, and placed the house under the protection of those who used it. The dishonest lawyer tried to burn the deed. The daughter saved it. The younger son finally spoke. The final line belonged to the stage manager. "A house survives when those inside love the work more than the name above the door." Bix read it twice. "Celia gave me the last line? She knew who had actually ran the theater. Obviously. I merely appreciate legal recognition." The original trust was still in the bank box. So was a sealed statement Celia had made before her death, copies of the restoration invoices, and a photograph of Adrian handing an envelope to Councilman Hennick in the Grand Regent's private dining room. The bank's fraud officer agreed to preserve the documents. The state attorney general opened an inquiry. A federal grant inspector joined because city restoration money had crossed state banking lines. But investigators warned us that proving fraud would take time. The Friday sale could still create complicated claims for an innocent buyer. Bellwether was not innocent, but the closing documents needed to show its knowledge. Harriet devised the plan. We would let the farewell proceed. I would publicly accept the retirement and ask Adrian to display the complete sale documents before I offered a blessing. Mina would control the Grand Regent's projection system. Norman would manage backup power. Bix would stage a short reading from Celia's final play as a tribute. Investigators would attend as guests. Marcus would receive one final chance to testify. Ivy would stay with Rachel in the audience, away from the stage. Ivy objected. "Grandma addressed the play to me too. Your grandmother also wrote, 'Avoid danger.' She wrote, 'Never go alone.' You will not be alone. You'll be seated beside an emergency room nurse capable of frightening death itself." Rachel nodded. "It usually listens." I called Lena and told her I was ready to surrender. She cried with relief. "Dad, thank you. I want Celia honored at the farewell." "Of course." A reading from her final play. A long pause. "What final play?" "The one Adrian tried to hide." Her relief disappeared. I continued before she could answer. "I have copies. Refuse, and I give them to every reporter tonight. Agree, and I appear Friday. Praise the transition, and make no accusation before the signing." That sounds like a threat. It is a schedule. Adrian took the phone. "You are under a guardianship order. It prevents contracts. It does not prevent community theater. What do you want?" 10 minutes. 3 actors. The full sale agreement projected behind us. Then I tell the audience I accept retirement. "Why the sale agreement?" "So nobody says I misunderstood what I blessed." He considered it. He believed the same story he had told the court: I was vain, aging, sentimental, and desperate for applause. 10 minutes, he said. Live streamed. Fine. Do not lock me in anything. He ended the call. Friday night, the Grand Regent Ballroom glittered beneath chandeliers designed to make ordinary people feel underdressed. A model of Mercer Square stood beside the stage. The theater's original sign had been placed on an easel like an artifact from a civilization that had recently lost a war. Adrian greeted donors beside Councilman Hennick. Dr. Sorrell sat near the front with his wife. Bellwether executives occupied a central table. Lena wore black. Marcus was nowhere visible. Bix's performers included Norman, Mina, and a 12-year-old scholarship student named Jamal Price, who had played the mansion's youngest servant in Celia's private workshop reading. I did not know Celia had held a workshop reading. Jamal knew every line. Mrs. Mercer said the youngest person on stage should always know where the exits are, he told me. The event began at 7. Adrian described Mercer Square as the next act. Councilman Hennick praised responsible redevelopment. Dr. Sorrell spoke briefly about honoring elders through compassionate transitions, which was ambitious for a man who had diagnosed me over lunch. Then Lena introduced me. The audience rose. This time, I walked onto the stage by choice. I wore my best suit, Celia's watch, and a small microphone connected to Mina's independent recording system. Lena hugged me. Her body shook. "Please do not make this worse," she whispered. "I am trying to find out whether you will make it better." She stepped away. I addressed the room. Celia believed every good building contains more than one ending. Tonight, before my family closes Lantern House, we will read the ending she left us. Bix brought out the ghostlight. Norman placed the Wycliffe portrait beside it. Adrian's smile vanished. The projection screen lowered. I said, "Before the reading, I ask that the complete sale agreement be displayed so the public can understand the transition I am being asked to bless." Adrian signaled the technician. Mina loaded the document. Page by page, the sale appeared. There was the forged authorization. There were the North Key debts. There was a clause forgiving Bellwether-controlled loans after closing. There was another clause paying a $300,000 consulting fee to Hennick Community Renewal. Councilman Hennick stood. "That is a routine development allocation." Harriet's voice came from the audience. "To a company registered at your home address?" Heads turned. Adrian moved toward the control table. Bix stepped into his path. "The performance has begun." Jamal opened Celia's script. He read the first line. When a house is sold by people who do not own its truth, the walls remember. Mina replaced the sale agreement with Celia's photographs. False restoration invoices appeared beside pictures of unrepaired rooms. The audience began whispering. Then the scholarship transfers filled the screen. $1,300,000 moved from children's accounts into Vail Historic Consulting. Parents in the room stood. A woman near the aisle shouted, "That was my daughter's tuition." Adrian reached the control table and pulled the power cable. The screen went black. The chandeliers went dark 1 second later. For a moment, the ballroom contained only frightened voices and the red glow of exit signs. Then the ghost light came on. Norman had connected it to an independent battery. A single bulb illuminated the center of the stage. Bix's voice entered the darkness. In theater, we'll leave one light burning so nobody walks into danger when the main lights fail. Phone flashlights began appearing across the ballroom. 1 became 10. 10 became hundreds. Mina's backup projector switched on from the rear balcony. The evidence returned across the white wall, larger than before. Adrian stared upward. "You cannot authenticate any of this," he said. A woman rose from the bellwether table. She introduced herself as Special Investigator Naomi Cross from the Attorney General's office. "We can," she said. 2 grand auditors stood beside her. A bank fraud officer joined them. Councilman Hennick moved toward the side exit. Rachel, who happened to be standing there, smiled politely. "The door is blocked," she said. It was not blocked. He believed her anyway. "I asked Mina to play Celia's recorder." My wife's voice filled the dark ballroom. "Adrian is not forcing our children to become dishonest. He is giving them reasons they prefer to honesty." Lena lowered her head. The recording described North Key, the false invoices, and the missing scholarships. Adrian shouted that Celia had been medicated and confused. That was when Dr. Sorrell made his mistake. He stood and said, "Her cognitive state was never formally evaluated." Investigator Cross looked at him. "But you formally evaluated Gideon Mercer?" He stopped speaking. Mina displayed his invoice to Adrian's company for capacity consultation dated 2 weeks before my supposed symptoms were documented. The audience turned toward him as one body. Bix whispered, "Bad review." Then the ballroom doors opened. Marcus entered carrying a banker's box. Adrian said, "Do not." Marcus walked to the stage. His face looked gray beneath the ghostlight. "I brought the original emails," he said. "And the internal loan approvals." Lena stared at him. "You had those?" "I copied them after Mom died." "You let me sign the affidavit." "You told me Adrian would replace the money." "You knew he would not." Marcus looked at me. "I knew enough to stop it. I did not stop it." That was the first honest sentence he had spoken all week. He faced the audience and admitted that he signed the guardianship statement because he feared bankruptcy and public disgrace. He admitted knowing the sale authorization was not mine. He admitted remaining silent about the scholarship shortage. Adrian called him weak. Marcus answered, "I was weak. You made weakness profitable." Then Lena stepped toward the microphone. For several seconds, she could not speak. Adrian reached for her hand. She moved away. "I signed the restoration affidavit," she said. "I knew some invoices were false. I told myself the money would be replaced after the sale. I helped prepare the guardianship petition, and I knew my father had never been examined by Dr. Sorrell." The room remained silent. She looked at me. I locked the costume vault door. That detail hurt more than the money. Not because it was the worst act. Because it was small enough to imagine. My daughter walking down a familiar corridor. My daughter turning a key. My daughter hearing me kick while she stepped onto the stage. "Why?" I asked. She cried openly now. "Because I knew if you reached the microphone, everyone would listen to you instead of me." There it was. Not Adrian. Not debt. Not preservation. A daughter who had spent her life beside a celebrated father and wanted one room where his voice did not decide the ending. I understood it. I did not excuse it. Investigator Cross asked Adrian to remain where he was. Hotel security closed the exits. Bellwether's attorneys began speaking urgently into phones. Ivy came to the stage carrying the original lantern Public Hearts Trust. She had remained with Rachel until investigators confirmed the room was secure. Adrian laughed when he saw the document. "The guardianship order prevents Gideon from transferring anything." Harriet answered from the aisle. "He is not transferring it. Your fraud triggered an automatic transfer 3 years ago, when the scholarship money moved. Tonight merely records the fact." I read Section 14 aloud. "The property, licenses, archives, and controlling shares passed permanently to a community arts board. The Mercer family lost ownership. Adrian lost the sale. Bellwether lost its discounted land. And I lost the theater I had spent 48 years calling mine." I signed the activation certificate as surviving trustee. The ghost light flickered once but remained on. Jamal turned to the final page of Celia's play. Bix delivered the last line. "A house survives when those inside love the work more than the name above the door." This time, nobody applauded immediately. The truth had made applause feel too simple. Then one scholarship student stood. Another joined. Actors, ushers, technicians, parents, donors, and subscribers rose around them. The sound grew slowly, not for me, but for the theater becoming impossible to sell in secret. Adrian was questioned that night and charged months later with fraud, conspiracy, theft of restricted funds, and bribery. Councilman Hennick resigned before his indictment, which he described as a desire to spend more time with family. His family reportedly requested clarification. Dr. Sorrell lost his medical license and pleaded guilty to filing false capacity statements. Lena pleaded guilty to making false grant certifications and participating in the guardianship fraud. She avoided prison after cooperating, returned every bonus she had received, and completed years of restitution and community service. Marcus received probation, restitution, and a permanent ban from managing charitable funds. His testimony helped recover records and reduce the theater's debt. The sale collapsed. Bellwether surrendered its claim after investigators proved North Key had been used to manufacture default. The community board reopened Lantern House 9 months later. The building required real repairs. For once, invoices matched walls. The lobby no longer displayed Mercer in gold letters. The new sign read Lantern Community Stage. I hated it for 3 days. Then I watched a group of children run beneath it carrying cardboard crowns, and the hatred became embarrassment. Bix chaired the board because everyone feared what would happen if she did not. Harriet became treasurer. Mina directed technical programs. 2 parents, 2 employees, 3 local artists, and 1 youth representative completed the board. I received no permanent seat. Celia had arranged that too. Instead, I taught acting on Wednesday afternoons and repaired props whenever nobody sensible was available. Ivy became the first youth representative. She later studied investigative theater, a degree I initially suspected she invented until a university sent tuition demands. Lena did not return for a year. When she finally came, she stood outside the costume vault. "I hear you kicking every time I walk past," she said. So do I. I do not expect forgiveness. Good. Expectations caused enough trouble. She nodded. What can I do? Bix appeared with a mop bucket. The upstairs toilets have chosen revolution. Lena looked at me. I handed her the plunger. She laughed once through tears. Then she took it. Marcus returned earlier. He began working with the youth program under supervision, hauling scenery, painting floors, and accepting instructions from teenagers who had not been born when he played Hamlet. Neither child received a title. Change does not begin with a title. It begins with work performed after nobody is required to trust you. On the first anniversary of the reopening, we staged Celia's complete play. The first ending made the audience angry. The second made them quiet. The third made them stand. I watched from the back row beside Basil, who had become too fat to patrol efficiently but continued to accept credit for the investigation. During the final scene, Ivy carried the ghost light to center stage. She spoke a new line she had added with the board's permission. An ending is not where the house goes dark. It is where we decide who must be able to find the door. The audience applauded. I looked toward Lena, who was working as an usher. Marcus stood near the scenery dock with paint on his sleeve. Bix watched the stage, prepared to correct heaven if the lighting cue came late. For most of my life, I believed I had built Lantern House. That was partly true. Celia and I raised the walls, found the money, chose the plays, and taught our children to love the sound of an audience gathering. But ownership had allowed me to confuse founding with deserving. My children made the opposite mistake. They confused inheritance with permission. The theater survived both errors. After the performance, I returned the ghost light to the empty stage. Its small bulb cast one circle across the floor. Basil followed me, sat in the center of it, and began cleaning one paw. "You were useful once," I told him. He looked at me with his remaining eye. It was the expression of an actor who considered the review beneath him. I turned toward the dark auditorium. The seats were empty, but the room did not feel abandoned. Tomorrow, children would arrive. Bix would complain. Someone would lose a prop. Someone would forget a line and discover a better one. Lena would keep working without asking whether the work restored her place. Marcus would keep learning that confession was an entrance, not a final bow. And I would keep missing the name above the door while being grateful the door remained. Celia's third ending had taken the theater from all of us. That was how she saved it for everyone. People still ask whether the night felt like revenge. It did not. Revenge would have been locking my children in the costume vault and announcing their retirement before they escaped through a wall. I considered it briefly. The plunger was available. What happened instead was harder. We told the truth, surrendered control, accepted consequences, and continued meeting one another in rooms where memory had not become mercy yet. That is less satisfying than revenge for approximately 5 minutes. Afterward, it lasts longer. The original forged sale agreement now hangs in a glass case beside Celia's script. Beneath it, the board placed a brass plaque. "The document that nearly ended the theater." Bix added a smaller card underneath. "Also, the signature was far too attractive." Every opening night, I touch the edge of Celia's ghost light before the audience enters. Not for luck. For direction. The main lights are beautiful, but they can be controlled by anyone near a switch. The smallest honest light matters when power fails, doors close, and people begin mistaking darkness for an ending. Ours remained burning. That was enough to find the truth. It was also enough to find the way back.